And that's what the undercarriage looks like with its first 2 cans of rattle can. One is Caterpillar Yellow, and the other one is Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover Black, flat black. So you'll need 3 cans to do this of black and 1 yellow to do one side, just to give you a heads up. And you can get the paint on Amazon pretty cheap. The black comes in a 6-pack. The yellow Krylon farm tractor stuff is a little bit more expensive. But if your tracks through dirt and sandblasted the side of the machine like my old tracks did, it's a good idea to go ahead and just paint that and protect it a little bit. You never know, when you're done putting your machine back together, you might consider selling it. And a machine with the fresh undercarriage is a pretty good selling feature. As you can see from this side, it looks pretty good. Alright, so here's how I got my setup for like a movable workbench. This is one of those crappy Yukon workbenches from Harbor Freight, and all I did was put 4 universal casters on the bottom of it, so it'll spin around and go anywhere I want it to, which is nice because this job is dirty. You don't want to be doing it in your shop, so I'm going to do it outside. That way I can just hose off any debris and stuff that falls down on the floor. This is how your sprocket comes from the manufacturer. So this was purchased from Track Loader Parts in Lithonia, Georgia. This is the kit that does both sides. I did the other side last week. Here's the right side for my machine out there. Poor little thing. So yeah, everything you need is going to be in this bucket. We're going to replace all these. My outer is still good. It looks pretty good. And like I said in the video earlier, I already loosened these while they were on the machine. It's easier to loosen these while these are on the machine than it is to remove these nuts. Yeah, when it's sitting on your workbench. So let's remove one, and then we'll get on past this, and I'll come back and show you the end result. So the way I do it is pretty much you just need 3/4 inch wrench and a 3/4 inch socket. You remove the nut, you're going to discard it, you're going to pull this bolt out, you're going to discard the bolt also. This side wasn't as bad. Some of them were terrible, but most of these weren't as bad. Caterpillar says you can go to 1/8, so 1/8 in size. But I definitely had to replace the left side, and it wasn't a bad deal to go ahead and buy both sides and just get it done and out of the way. So out of your bucket, you're going to need 2 big ones. You're going to need a new bolt. You're going to need 2 small ones. And then buried down at the very bottom, you're going to need your bag of nuts. So when I put it together the first time, I used Lubrimatic marine grease. And I just simply take a handful of Lubrimatic marine grease and I put a light coat on here. It may be the only time that these ever get greased. And I put them together. And I'm just doing this for the video. I'm going to cut this video in a second. And I'm going to do all of these all at once. But you got those greased up. I'm going to take a towel. I'm going to clean my gloves off a little bit. I'm going to put some grease on this. I doubt it'll help anything, but it might preserve it for the first minute of use. You drop this in, you run it through. Drop the next one in, run it through, take a nut, so these nuts are, they are lock nuts, so they are tight to get on. Do not tighten it down. So I did this one, just leave this loose. Go all the way around the squirrel cage, replace all of these, and then once they're all in place, then and only then, come back and tighten these down. Tighten these down last. Just like you loosened them, all of them first, tighten them down last. If you come to some of these that are hard to get out, take your old one and beat it out. Push it through and beat it out. Alright, and that is your completed sprocket. It was a little bit more difficult than I was hoping for. I did have about 6 of those bolts that wouldn't come out. From what I could tell is whoever had the machine before me replaced some of them and didn't replace others. So it seems very expensive to do it that way. The cheapest way to get these parts is to buy the kit that'll do both sides of your machine. It's right at $1,000, which is pretty expensive, but I've seen just this roller here go for $50. So if you're just replacing the bolt and the ones that are worn out, I'm going to say you're probably wasting your time and your money, because it is not easy to get into this machine.
Alright, in this segment, I wasn't very chatty, so we're going to bring one of the bogies up and put it back on the machine. I'm pretty sure you can't do this alone. One of these axles is very heavy. 2 of them is extremely heavy. And then once you put them in the bogie carrier, it's insane. It's very heavy. So I'm going to use my shop crane, wrap a chain around it, and just slowly lift it into place. And any of you that have watched my other video, so on my removal video, Um, I said you could probably slide these bogies out from the front or the rear of the machine, and yes, you can. Once you drop them to the ground, they'll roll right out of the machine. So I'm slowly working this up into place, and the bogie is about as wide as this one side of the undercarriage. So you kind of have to work it to get it up in, and then once you get it up to where it meets the frame, then you have to line up your 4 bolt holes, and that's where this Prybar comes into play. So not the Prybar I'm moving the wheel with, but the other Prybar with the pointy tip. So if you don't yet have one of these Prybars with a pointy tip like this, it's very important you get one. It makes lining up bolts very easy. So yeah, if you got one, it's a good idea to use it. Don't use the bolt. If you're using the bolt, you have a chance of destroying the threads on the bolt. Always use a Prybar. So we run our bolt up from the bottom, put the nut on top. And we're going to tighten this bolt down, but we're not going to tighten it down all the way, because we want to make sure that this bogie will move, so we can get those back 2 bolts into place. And then we'll come back and we'll tighten it down super tight at the end. So you see how important this Prybar is. When you stick it in there, you can move that bogie around and line up those back bolts. That's why we didn't tighten up the front bolt all the way. And now we're going to put bolts in the back. So yes, you do see a new bolt going through there. Before I started this project, I went out and I bought, a handful of bolts that I thought I would need for it. And since I'm finishing up the project now, instead of putting old bolts back on the machine and having a storage bin full of new bolts, I don't want to be that old bolt hoarder guy that dies with 800 pounds of bolts and nails and crap in his house. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the new bolt on the machine, and the old bolts I'll just throw away. I hope you're not that bolt hoarder. I want to say that I kind of am. I go to a lot of dead people auctions, and it's hard for me to pass up a deal when there's 500 pounds of nails for $5. You might as well buy them. You never know which one of your friends might need some nails. A lot of my friends come directly to me just to borrow nails and screws and sandpaper and stuff that someone was dying to leave me.
Oh. There it is, just rebuilt. Slide it into place. Now, let me point something out to you. These are Duraforce wheels. See the angle there? And see how it's flat there? Make sure your angle goes on the inside. Inside, flat, angle, angle, flat. And then we just tighten down these 9/16 bolts. That is tight. That is tight.
Do not cross thread these bolts. Get a new bolt. Don't go cheap. If you don't have to reuse the bolts, replace them. It's cheaper to replace one of those bolts than it is to replace that axle lock. On this job, I ended up replacing about 4 of those 9/16 bolts. When they were going in, it felt like they were too tight or cross-threaded or whatnot. So I just set them aside. And like I told you earlier in the video, I bought extra bolts. So I had extra bolts on hand. Extra bolts, extra lock washers, extra nuts.
So that looks pretty good. Got us a tight machine again. Now you can just move on to the back. I'm going to put the back on. And if you remember earlier when I showed you it was all foggy, this is what it looks like at about 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. The fog starts to lift, the sun pops up over the trees, and it becomes a beautiful day in the Smoky Mountains. Okay, here we go. Got the sprocket together. I'm getting ready to put it on the machine. We are at about noon on Memorial Day. I started on Thursday before Memorial Day. I've done a lot of playing in between. But yeah, now we're at about noon on Memorial Day. It finally stopped raining about 10 o'clock this morning. So I'm out here. It's a wet, sloppy mess, but at least the sun's shining. I got my sprocket ready to go together. I got my bolts. You see there's grease on these bolts. That is marine grease. So these are my bolts for my sprocket. These are my bolts for the ASV cover. And then that's my adjuster bolt for right there once we get the track on. So we're going to line this thing up and see if we can get this sprocket to go on. And once you get one of these bolts in, the rest of them pretty much fall into place. But it's getting that first one lined up, right? And I got really lucky. And I'm not kidding you when I tell you this. Put the marine grease on your bolts. It'll make these bolts go in a lot easier, and it'll preserve those bolts for the life of this machine or the first 5 minutes of usage. More than likely it's going to be the first 5 minutes of usage. Yeah, I'm going to need a longer extension. So I'm not going to tighten these all the way down, but I do want to snug it up because it will make the rest of the other 10 bolts a lot easier to go on. That's the only reason. There we go. So at this point, I can lower my crane. I can get my crane and my chain out of the way. And of course, that's going to happen, because why not, right? There we go. All right. So I am going to cheat on this. I've got an impact behind me. I typically don't use an impact, but I'm going to start each one of these by hand, and then I'm going to finish them off with an impact and then tighten them down by hand. Some of these go in really easy, and I'm hoping if I ever have to take this machine back apart, it'll come apart just as easy.
So I rarely use an impact, but I am going to use an impact on this. Thanks to my buddy Roland, he bought one a few months ago, and he doesn't like keeping tools around his house, so he just leaves them at mine. So I do have air tools, air impacts and stuff, but this electric Bauer from Harbor Freight really saves the day. Thanks, Roland.
Alright, there's by hand. The impact part's done. Let me get a breaker bar. That's actually pretty good. Now I didn't go crazy on those, but I knew when I took them off, they were tighter than the impact could move. So that's pretty much all I did. It's made it a little bit tighter. Alright, next thing we're going to work on is our ASV support. And let me point out, if you're looking for a Prybar, this is a Pittsburgh Prybar. Look at it. Look at it, folks. I've only owned this about a month. And yeah. But we're going to lift that motor up just a little bit. And of course, you do need to line these up first, in case you're wondering what I did wrong. So I splurged and I got all new bolts. All right. That's what I should have done the first time. I got new bolts for the bottom also. I'll take that lock washer off. So that's what you should be seeing right now. All right. Pull that tight. And if you're wondering why I put all new bolts, it's because when I started this project, I went out and bought a whole bunch of new bolts, knowing I was going to break some off. And I didn't break as many as I thought I was going to break. And I'm not going to hoard new bolts. I'm just going to put them on the machine and call it good. Now one of these here on the bottom, one of those I broke off taking it apart. So I had to replace one of them. Can I get my big old hand in there? Probably not. There we go. Yay! Alright, there you have it. So that didn't take much to get that sprocket back on. And you see I put all new covers on these, on those hoses. What was the worst was this one on the drive motor, that one. All of them were in the wrong place, right? So now they're all going in the right direction where they're supposed to go, but now they have new protective. They were looking kind of, the outer part of the hose was looking kind of bad, so this will protect those hoses until the next track change. But alright, so sprocket's on. All that's left is to drag that track right there over to this machine and put it on. Alright, here we go.
So check this out. I don't have the tools to adjust these tracks. I don't have the one that'll do the idler, that'll put tension on the tracks from the idler, and I don't have the adjuster which goes on the frame and pushes the squirrel cage back into place. But if you own one of these machines, and if you're watching this video, I'm pretty sure you own this machine, you do have chain binders. You've got to move your equipment somehow. So you got a chain binder so you can put your equipment on the trailer and haul it to where you need to take it. If you don't have chain binders, or if you're using the chain binders that just clank into place, the old-fashioned ones, run down to your local Harbor Freight, and for less than $100 you can buy this chain binder right here. This is I think this chain binder is rated for like 9,000 pounds or something like that. It's not the 5,400 pound one. It's the more heavy duty one. But this is what I use. I have 4 of these that I use to put my machine on the trailer. So I just take my chain binder and I put one hook on the frame, this frame rail that does not move at all. It actually holds the suspension to the body of the loader. And then I take one of the bolts from the squirrel cage. You know, you got those 12 long bolts that came out of your squirrel cage when you rebuilt the sprockets. So I take one of those long bolts and I put it through this this sleigh that the drive motor runs on. So there's the bolt right there, and there's already a hole there where your adjuster tool goes. And now your chain binder's in place, and you just start ratcheting your chain binder and watch your track get tighter as you pull the 2 pieces together. Hey, so this is Greased Lightning. Greased Lightning, I put a link to it in the info section, but Greased Lightning is really slimy. You spray it on your machine anywhere that you have oil, grease, grime. If you spray the Greased Lightning on it, let it sit for 5-10 minutes. Don't let it dry. Just let it soak into any oil or whatever, and then come back and wash it off. It'll get rid of all that greasy residue. But when you spray it on, it is so slimy, and it's almost better than WD-40 when it's wet. It's better than a lubricant when it's wet, but once it dries pretty hard. So give Greased Lightning a try. It's probably better than the degreaser you're currently using. All right, so I had to move my chain binder so I could get a better bite
That's wrong
on
tool for the
the
job. I needed to break the bar.
yeah, on the adjustment. The chain binder is the wrong tool for the job, but it will get this job done. You just have to make a few adjustments to get it right. You know what I'm saying? But I was able to move the chain binder, get that bolt that was holding everything in place out of the way, and now I'm going to take the track and I'm going to tighten it up and get those final 2 bolts in the rear. So I'm almost there now. And you don't want to like over tighten your belt. You just want to get it, over tighten your track. You just want to get it tight so it doesn't fall off.
Maybe move your cart out of the way. I don't want to go buy another one. Mexican Coke, the best. Mexican Coke is the best. Alright, last bolt. This is the 1 1/8. At the beginning of the video, I showed you the wrong way to take it out. This is the right way to put it in. The bolt goes in from the bottom, and if you look, there's a collar that the washer sits in. Then the nut goes on. Whoever put it together last time did it wrong. Should use deep well. Alright, there's that. Now you got to tighten up your 4 bolts that hold the frame together. Oh man, lost my wrench. Alright, that's what it looks like. Matches the other side that I did a couple weeks ago. All good. I did replace my joystick boots. Those are $6 shifter boots from Amazon. I refuse to pay the $100 each for the rubber boots. That's my machine.